Look, there might be 6 teams on an NFL bye this week. Me and Donovan are not one of them. Okay, we are here for you through Mageddon. Jesse Rubinoff, Donovan Bennett. So 6 teams on a bye this week, DJ. Most teams on a bye in a single week this season. As we bring you into Sportsnet Fantasy Playbook Live. Hopefully, this is where we can earn our stripes, Deej, and earn our medal because we need to be able to help the people get through what has been a very difficult and stressful week of trying to figure out who should play. I've seen trades that otherwise wouldn't have been made if the buys weren't coming into effect. There's players on the rosters that are going to play today that otherwise in any other week you would never want to be starting in fantasy. It's the reality of the situation that we face here in week 7. The most amount of teams on a bye this week. How are you coping with it with your fantasy teams? And do you feel for fantasy owners out there everywhere having to deal with this week?
If you can get through this week, you can get through anything, essentially.
Yeah.
By my count, there's 20-ish like factor fantasy players, people who, if up and healthy, you'd be starting. Some teams with a lot of fantasy guys on them. A lot of people have Dallas Cowboys in their lineup. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have some Pittsburgh Steelers in their lineup, obviously, especially Canadians, as we love Claypool. So yeah, massive. And for some people, it's just gonna be a scheduled loss. Like, what are you gonna do, right? What are you
It's
gonna do?
true, yeah.
Especially if you have some guys on the IR early in the year. You don't have maybe the same amount of flexibility given the people that you thought were going to factor for your team when you made the draft. But you talked about the trades. And it is around that time as we get closer to November where people say, "Man, I'm sitting on 1 win, 2 wins. I
Mm-hmm.
gotta increase the risk quotient," to quote Daryl Morey, and go all in and make some trades that maybe don't make sense. But ultimately, if I just put my lineup together based off of projections week in, week out, I'm going to stack up some L's and I'm going to be out of the running. And who wants to be
That's right.
in a fantasy league where you don't have a chance to get into the money or the bragging rights? So we are seeing some less than balanced trades because people just want to feel the team that makes sense right now to get a win, and then they'll figure out the future weeks as they come. So if you've started well, and if you haven't been hit by Mageddon, is that what you called it?
Mageddon, yeah.
Then
Yeah. I don't think that's
just
I don't think it's original, but
no,
whatever.
you need to
Whatever.
trademark that.
Yeah.
Then you're sitting pretty. Sit back, let it come to you. Here's a question, not only for you but everybody on the stream. And thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We already got some questions coming in from YouTube. We will address those soon. When you're drafting, are you the
Mm.
person who's like, "We've got 5 guys,
This is a
week
great
7,"
question.
or do you just pick the best player on your board, or are you the person who says the goal is not to go undefeated? I'm going to have a bunch of people on a bye, same week, take that scheduled L, but I'm going to feel good about my lineup for every other week. What is your bye philosophy?
Well, I feel like this is your opportunity as a GM to be like, okay, I'm the GM of an NFL team or an NBA team or an NHL team or a baseball team. This is what I wanted. I have the opportunity to decide my strategy. And in that case, I would think if I was the GM of a professional team, I would take the best player available at the draft. That's me. And so when I'm working with my fantasy teams, most of the time I'm going with the best player available in the draft. And then I end up looking at the buys. A lot of times on Yahoo or whatever, they'll have your roster and then they have the bye weeks right beside. And then it hits you. And my reaction a lot of times is like, uh-oh, like didn't do that well. But I take solace in the fact that I've chosen and selected the guys that I want to have on my roster. So most of the time, I'm best player available. Are you?
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah,
There was, for a long time, a notion of don't take too many players on the same team because you're going to get
yeah,
hit hard with the bye. Don't care. I like players on the same team. If it's a good offense, it's one less team I have to pay attention to on Sunday. One less
100%.
team I have to watch on Red Zone. I will say this in terms of managing the bye. My personal strategy is get ahead of it. Do your work early.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll set my lineup 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks in advance. Just scroll through, week by week, not just setting it for the matchup that week, just to see, are there any red flags that I'm not
Mhm.
realizing? Maybe I got a couple guys at a position in IR and there's a huge buy situation. Do I need to stock up on a tight end now and not do it when I need one because I'm only rostering one tight end or one QB? I try to see what's coming so that I can start to get some waiver selections early and not do it out of desperation where you're getting a tight end that's solely touchdown dependent. So that's the way I kind of manage the buy, is try to take care of those handcuff scenarios where you're stuck and you're like, man, I have 24 hours and I need a kicker. And and I don't know necessarily, if there's going to be a kicker available that's not on a buy, something like
Yeah.
that.
I think those are the types of nuggets of info that the people are here for. Like they want to hear, what can I implement? What can I learn from these guys and implement moving forward? And that I think is one of the strategies that people can take away, because a lot of times it's easy to fall into a trap of being reactionary with your fantasy team. But if you have the time, number one, and the wherewithal to look ahead a couple of weeks, you could save yourself some headaches when you wake up on Sunday morning and say, uh-oh, what do I do in this spot? Because it can become very difficult, and you could end up taking a scheduled L just based on injuries, buys, as we work our way deeper into the NFL season. I do have to address the elephant in the room. Andy not joining us this week. There
He's
are
on a buy.
rumors that he's on a bye. There are rumors that he's somewhere in Cleveland celebrating the emergence of Ernest Johnson on Thursday night, because we do know that he is a Cleveland Browns fan. So Andy will be joining us again next week, I believe. So, Andy, wherever you are, my man, we miss you, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah,
One,
celebrating the emergence of Johnson, or maybe lamenting the looming decision on whether or not you offer a lucrative contract to Baker Mayfield,
oh my
knowing that
goodness,
he can't stay healthy, and even when he does, uh, you know, he's not really the reason why they win. So
no,
we'll
I mean
see.
they have some issues over in Cleveland. I mean they're a good football team. There's no question about it. They have a great running game. I think they've proven with what Dearness Johnson did on Thursday night that the offensive line is something special. It's not taking anything away from Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt, but they do have a system in place that really works with the ground game. And like you said, the decision moving forward is Baker Mayfield the guy, because he's had some time to prove it here, and I'm not sure he necessarily has passed that test. And he's going to have a lingering injury the rest of the season. So there are some questions certainly for the Cleveland Browns, and we will see what happens with the running back situation, because obviously the health has been a major hiccup in that backfield. Although D'Ernest Johnson, and it was Nate Burleson, I believe, who reimagined D'Ernest Johnson's name into D'Earned It Johnson, which I thought was fantastic. So I do want to get to a couple of the sort of breaking stories early here on Sunday. Sterling Shepard was expected to be back in the lineup, and now he has been downgraded, I guess, to a game time decision, and that is a Giants team, and specifically a Giants offense that is just decimated with injuries. No Kadarius Toney today, he's out with an ankle injury. No Kenny Golladay today, he's out with a knee injury. Saquon Barkley obviously will not be in the lineup. He's dealing with his ankle issue. So, from the running back perspective, it'll be Devontae Booker again. I think I'm pretty confident. I'd be pretty confident firing him up as an RB2. He's going to get most of the looks there in that backfield. Darius Slayton out wide is expected to play. But what is going on with the Giants, and what do you do when it comes to, I guess, Darius Slayton, and your thoughts on Booker? And give us maybe scenarios if Sterling Shepard does in fact play. How does that impact the receiving core? And if he doesn't play, would you start Darius Slayton confidently?
So this might sound counterintuitive, but I feel great about Booker. Had a pretty good day. Had a touchdown, vultured from him. Add that on, he's a top player in fantasy in the week. He's going to get the lion's share of the carries,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel great about Slayton. because of the negative game script. This is a game that we're expecting them to be down and down early. They're going to have to pass. He is literally, with Golladay really not being a factor given the amount of money they spent and not being
Mhm.
healthy. He's by default become the first look option in that offense, and so he's going to get the lion's share of the targets, and so I feel good about Slayton. Even if Shepard is going to be up, he's not a guy who's been able to practice and gain reps throughout the
Yeah.
week. He hasn't a guy who's been overly consistent. So I'd be a little bit down on Slayton, but unless you have to because of the buy situation, I wouldn't really be too excited to start Shepard, even if he is up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. We've seen that before. Guys who don't get a chance to practice throughout the course of the week. And a lot of times let's face it, you're taking a gamble. It could be a re-aggravation of the injury as the game wears on. It could be a snap count that we're not necessarily aware of. So I do think there is a gamble there when Sterling Shepard potentially see what happens with him today, whether he starts or sits. Okay, I encourage everybody to continue to send in their questions. We will get to as many as we possibly can. Let's begin with David on YouTube. Ricky Seals Jones. He's got a tight end question, DJ. Ricky Seals Jones or Zach Ertz? Seals Jones has been dominating the tight end position for the Washington football team with Logan Thomas on IR dealing with injury. And Zach Ertz, now the tight end of note in Arizona. A lot of mouths to feed in that offense, though. So who are you going with, Ricky Seals Jones or Zach Ertz?
Seals Jones, Zach Ertz. It's an offense that he's familiar with, but he's still new, and so this will be the first time he's up with the team. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
mouths to feed. I do think that the targets for Hopkins is going to be through the roof this year, as they're going to want to get him in the end zone against his former team,
Yeah.
the Houston Texans, which will actually impact my answer for another question that we've got coming up. But you look at the opposite in Washington. Not many mouths to feed. Gibson has been banged up this year. McLaurin has been banged up this year. Both given where they were drafted have been a little bit of a disappointment. Seals Jones has exceeded any expectations, and in many cases, someone who wasn't drafted and now is a must start if you got him on your team. So you should be starting him this week as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Steels Jones, he's been running at a 99% snap count rate with this offense. And I do think, in terms of game script, I think with the Washington football team potentially getting down in this game, I think Heineke is going to be looking two ways: Ricky Seals Jones and Terry McLaurin, who's also been eating like crazy in this offense. So yeah, I do agree. I would go with Ricky Seals Jones, and also I'd want to see a little bit more from Zach Ertz. Still a bit of an unknown when it comes to that offense. We talked about it. There's so many mouths to feed. How does this addition of Zach Ertz, how does it impact Hopkins? I agree with you. I think they're going to make a concerted effort to get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins today. But moving forward, what does it mean for Rondale Moore? What does it mean for Christian Kirk? What does it mean for Chase Edmonds? There are so many players and weapons in that offense that spreading it around often comes at the detriment to many of those players just because they're so loaded. So, yeah, I agree. We are in agreement. Ricky Seals Jones over Zach Ertz today at the tight end position. Kirk on Facebook is asking, can we trust DK Metcalf on Monday, or should I audible to Rondale Moore, Michael Carter, or Rashad Bateman today? Now, obviously, the major issue here is that Geno Smith remains under center for the Seattle Seahawks, and he has not shown any semblance of chemistry with either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. It has been a struggle for the Seattle offense. Their backfield is also a mess just due to injury with Alex Collins. So, do you think it's still feasible, given the talent level of DK Metcalf, to trust him on Monday?
I mean, listen, DK Metcalf is considerably a
Mm-hmm.
much better player than the other people mentioned. I will say this: I don't love the matchup with Metcalf this week because who is he going up against? Predominantly throughout the game, Marcus Lattimore. This guy who doesn't travel into the slot in Lattimore. He is someone who's going to stay out wide and beyond him. He's staying out of the slot on over 80% of plays. So I actually think if there is a Seattle receiver to have a good day against a very good New Orleans Saints
Mhm.
defense, it'll be Lockett because he will be able to move around and find a more optimal matchup.
Yeah,
So so if
I do
you
agree.
yeah, if you want if you're afraid of Metcalf, uh, Bateman would be the name of those mentioned. Again, Rondale Moore, nice, but I think Hopkins is getting so many of the looks in that offense this week specifically. And to your point about Ertz,
Mhm.
we don't know what their base formation is going to be now that they have a factor in the
Yeah.
passing game at the tight end position, right? You've got Kirk. You've obviously got Hopkins who's going to stay on the field. Obviously you've got Green. So are they going to be a four wide team, a five wide team, or are they going to be a little bit more balanced and have one or two tight ends on the field? So I'm not sure how many snaps Moore is going to get. I'd like to wait and see, what that offense looks like. So if you had to choose from this group, I would say Bateman. Don't love the Metcalf matchup this week, but I'm not sure I hate it so much that I would go to this tier of a player to swap in for him.
Yeah, I think it's one of those starts where you sort of got to just trust the talent and swallow it a little bit here. DK Metcalf, you know what he can do if he gets going. So who knows if all week they've been telling Geno Smith, hey, you got to take advantage of the guys you have out wide. You got to feed them the ball. You got to find a way. Maybe we're drawing up plays where they're a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, so you're not forcing Geno Smith to really stretch the field. Because look, DK Metcalf is a an athletic freak. Okay, that's the reality of the situation here. You got to get the ball in his hands. He is a playmaker. So I think you sort of swallow your pride here. You say, I know that he struggled with Geno Smith, but at the end of the day, he's the most talented of this group. And I would start him as sort of a wide receiver two gamble, understanding that given the struggles of Geno Smith, it is possible that the gamble doesn't work out. I do agree with you, though, that of the rest of this group, if you're not feeling comfortable with Metcalf, I think Rashad Bateman certainly is in a spot here where he could thrive. He out targeted Hollywood Brown 6'5" last week in eight less snaps than Hollywood Brown. And this is a guy coming out of Minnesota who is an awesome wide receiver prospect, runs really good routes, has really good hands. And I think that they're going to make an effort to get him involved in this offense. And we've seen from Lamar Jackson that he's passing the ball more than he's ever passed the ball before. So that means that we need to be more bullish on the receiving core and the tight end position in Baltimore. Mark Andrews has been thriving. Hollywood Brown's been doing really well. This is yet another weapon to add to the Ravens. And I think Rashad Bateman, if we're talking in terms of season long outlook, I think Rashad Bateman is someone that if he's not picked up for whatever reason, you go get him. And if you want to find a way to buy low on someone who is just getting up to speed, I think Rashad Bateman is certainly worth a look.
Yeah.
Drew on YouTube. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to your point, it, if not for the Hollywood Brown drops this year, Lamar Jackson might be leading
Yeah.
every major category in passing. And the other thing about Metcalf, I do actually think he's going to be a pretty motivated player. For those who haven't been paying attention, he's been fighting with Sterling Sharp all week
Yeah,
on
yes.
social media.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he does some talking on the field with his play this week.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. Drew on YouTube is asking, Debo Samuel has the second highest fantasy points per game average of any wide receiver in 2021. That's facts. Thank you very much, Drew. Would you sell high on him before he comes back to earth? Now, I know this is sort of a season long question, but I do have to point out as it pertains to the game with the Colts tonight, there is expected weather in the area in Santa Clara and bad weather, 15 to 18 mile an hour winds. They're calling it like a cyclone bomb in Santa Clara. So I think you have to downgrade the passing and receiving options for both of those teams. I don't necessarily think it means you take Deebo Samuel out of the lineup. I think he's just such a good weapon that you have to. But do keep an eye on the weather situation in San Francisco. So as it pertains to this specific question, would you sell high on Deebo or would you keep him given his dominance so far?
Hell no. One, to address the weather. I actually like a player like Debo more in that scenario.
Mm,
Think about how he gets his passes: quick game, screens, pop passes. Often he's getting value, and one of the reasons why he's got so many points as a receiver is because he's carrying the football, giving you running yards
yeah.
out of the receiver position. So in a bad weather game, I like him more because he's a bit of a security blanket, especially with Kittle on the IR. He's going to be that offense. The backs are going to come and go, depending on how Jimmy G plays and the health of Trey. The quarterbacks might come and go. He is the staple on that offense. So that's one. In terms of selling him high, you're selling him high for one reason. You're afraid that the injury history at some point is going to creep back up, because
Right.
when he's been up in the last 2.5 years, he's been a dominant football player. So I'm not worried about the production. If you think at some point he's going to get hurt and he's not going to be available, sure. If you have a surplus at the receiver position, you need to balance your team out a little bit. Maybe you had a running back injury. Maybe you had Baker Mayfield as your quarterback. You need another quarterback. If you need a little more balance on your team and you can sell high from the surplus at wide receiver, knowing that there might be an injury question with Deebo, and you want to balance out your team, sure, right? That's just
It's
good.
good managing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just good asset location or relocation. The premise of the question is the amount of fantasy points per game he's averaged, and I don't think that is going to change anytime soon. We've seen it with someone like like Hopkins. He was getting 9 targets a game last year. That's down
Mm.
to 6, as you mentioned. There's so many mouths to feed on that offense. So he's someone who is dependent on being a look in that offense and obviously to make plays, because he's only making plays for you one way. Where Debo, he might only catch 2 or 3 balls, but he could have 2, 3, 4 carries and still give you double-digit fantasy points. So I'm not worried about his production moving forward at all. He might not stay the second highest, but he's still going to be, top 5, top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a phenomenal point. And also to note in the Debo situation, Jimmy G is expected to be back under center tonight, and he thrives with Jimmy Garoppolo under center. The chemistry with Trey Lance yet to be determined, but if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to stay this quarterback, the Niners quarterback for the foreseeable future, then that just means more good things for Debo Samuel. Okay, DJ on YouTube. Was this your question?
It
Got
was.
a flex dilemma. Christian Kirk or Rashad Bateman. We just talked about Rashad Bateman, and we did address earlier the mouse to feed issue with the Arizona Cardinals. So, who you going with in the flex, Christian Kirk or let's call him our boy Rashad Bateman?
Yeah, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but for a lot of the same reasons we talked about earlier, it's Rashad Bateman.
Yeah,
I think Hopkins is going to be fed the ball early and often. I'm not sure if Kirk's going to be on the field early and often
mm,
because of the changes offensively. I do think the Cardinals are going to score a lot of points. I don't think you can really go wrong either way. It would be nice to get both in the lineup if you could utilize, the wide receiver 3 spot if you're in a 3 wide receiver league and the flex. But if I had to choose one, it would be Bateman.
yeah, I agree. And the reason I agree is because Christian Kirk has incredible boom or bust potential. And that has been his MO throughout his NFL career. And you just don't know when the boom is going to come. And I feel like when it comes to Rashad Bateman, like I said earlier, they're going to make an effort to get the ball in his hands, just given his ball security, his ability to make grabs, run proper routes. I'm bullish on Rashad Bateman, and I think just based on the situation, I like Bateman in this spot over Christian Kirk. We got a lot of really good questions coming in now. So I urge you to continue to send them in, and we will get to as many as we can in the next half hour plus here. Mighty on YouTube is asking, I believe it's Devontae Booker or Jalen Waddle at flex half PPR. Now, this one, to me, is extremely interesting because you're coming off the back of Jalen Waddle just absolutely going nuts for the Dolphins in London, 2 touchdowns, a billion targets and catches with Tua Tagovailoa back under center. So you like Devontae Booker or Waddle here? And it's a good question because it's a running back against a wide receiver too. And a lot of times you get into these, and I sort of just automatically will say you got to go with the running back just because of the usage situation. But in this case, seeing what we've seen from Waddle and how they love getting him the ball and checking the ball down, like this is a conversation to be had. So let's have that conversation. Devontae Booker or Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, it's a good one. And my my first inclination would always say running back, especially
Mm,
if it's close. Especially when given the amount of people that are down in that offense, Devontae Booker is going to be in the screen game. He's going to be lined, out wide as a wide receiver. They're going to be forcing the ball to him. Last week he had 4 receptions for 28 yards uh, for the Giants. And yes, he's not Saquon Barkley, but they've utilized him in a very similar fashion where he's literally running wide
yeah.
receiver routes, not nearly as well, but he doesn't have much talent around him. Uh, Waddle is great, but he is pretty boom or bust. Similar to Henry Ruggs in his first year, there's going to be weeks where he's a monster, and there's going to be weeks where he's a little bit quieter, um, because they do expect him to run the top off the defense. He's not running the entire route tree in this portion of his young career. So you're going to get some explosive plays through the passing game. But I would choose Booker. He's the more conservative choice, but he's the more reliable choice. And I half PPR makes me consider Waddle a little bit more, but I wouldn't be surprised if Booker has quite a few passes, as well. Not as many as Waddle, but he's going to give you, some solid yards in the run game. And if you're telling me there's a back who's could give you anywhere from 70 to 100 yards rushing, and anywhere from 2 to 5
Mm.
receptions, that's someone you're starting every week.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I would want to keep an eye on the status of Devontae Parker in Miami because last I've seen is that it's an uphill battle for him to play in Week 7, and what that says to me is that that's one less weapon for the Dolphins and one more reason to feed the ball to Jalen Waddle. So I part of me wants to say if you can find a way to get both of these guys in the lineup, I would because if Parker doesn't play I think there is potential for a boom here for Jalen Waddle. The question is that boom going to be worth more to you, or that potential boom worth more to you than what Devontae Booker is obviously going to achieve here? And I know the Panthers defense is really good. They've been outstanding so far this year. But because of the injuries to the Giants, it just feels like de facto Devontae Booker has to get a lot of touches. They're going to try and get him involved in the passing game out of the backfield. 72% of the snaps for him last week. So I really do believe that Devontae Booker is the appropriate choice in this spot. But I don't dislike what I potentially could see from Jalen Waddle here in a spot with Devontae Parker, especially if he does not play.
Just
Uh,
to follow up,
yeah,
the quarterback in Miami is looking over his shoulder to see
no question.
when a potential felon is coming into the building to take his job. So Tua is going to be slinging it,
Yeah.
which
Oy.
is another reason to consider Waddle in scenarios like this. I don't know about you, Jesse. I let the projections help me dictate it. Not I'm talking about not the player projections, your team projections, and the
Mm,
projection of the person you're going up against. So if and we're going to see some wide gaps in projections this week because of how much different people are impacted by the bye. If you got to overcome projected 20, 30, 40 point deficit, or you literally need the ceiling of all of your players to
mm,
hit, then maybe you play a Waddle because you're going boom or bust. But if it's a little bit closer, you can't afford to take an L at any specific roster spot, or someone who's in a single digit or low single digit scenario, then I think you play it a little bit closer to the vest, and play Booker. So that's kind of sometimes when there's good arguments on both sides. Sometimes I let the projections and what the matchup is calling for dictate who I may start or sit.
I think that's a phenomenal point. And so if you're looking for the boom here, Mighty, you might have to look at a Jalen Waddle in this spot. A little bit of breaking and surprising news here. It appears Ramondre Stevenson, who sort of seemed like he was carving out a bit of a niche in the Patriots backfield, will be inactive today, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it seemed like he was filling a little bit of that James White role, the best pass catcher out of the backfield there for the Patriots. So that one raises an eyebrow for me. I know that in earlier in the season he had that fumble basically, and the Patriots coaching staff, notorious for this, they just said, "All right, you're done. Like you're done for a couple weeks at least. You got to prove to us in practice that you have the ability to hold on to the ball." But Ramondre Stevenson, I know, especially in a spot with so many buys in Week 7, I know there were a lot of people that picked up Ramondre Stevenson and were hoping that he was going to play, but that appears to be the case. So, any thoughts on why that's the case? It doesn't appear like he's injured. It appears like he's just getting benched again, which is really surprising, but also elevates Damian Harris. We are a fantasy show, and we got to look at the scenarios and the fallout from that. So it looks like Damian Harris will be elevated. Ramondre Stevenson not playing.
Yeah, my thought is I'm now dropping Ramondre Stevenson as we
Like
speak.
right now, yeah.
Yeah, literally right now. As I had him starting. Listen, this is going to be amazing. Easy, great game script. They're going to pound the Jets. They're going to run the ball to death. But what we know is you can't trust Bill Belichick backfield. You can't trust the Kyle Shanahan backfield. So now, I mean, I should be asking our YouTube friends, who should I pick up on the waiver wire? Lev Bell, DJ Dallas, Giovanni Bernard. These are the options I have left, because I have Christian McCaffrey sitting on my IR, and James Robinson on a bye, and I need to fill out another running back spot after
Crazy.
Gordon the third has already played for me. But no one cares about my difficult fantasy situation. The Patriots backfield is a stay away for me. People thought Harris was going to be the sleeper, potentially prop bet, lead the league in touchdowns, behind a great offensive line, and you just never know if Bill Belichick is going to be a little bit ruthless with his backfield
Crazy.
and send a message to his team. So hopefully, most people aren't in the same scenario where they saw some potential upside. They saw the projected 5 points. They're like, no way, it's the Jets. He's going to double or triple that. And now he's not going to give you any points. So thank you for that update. Anyone who's got Stevenson in the roster, in the
Yeah.
starting lineup, get him out. And quite frankly, feel fine about dropping him and streaming one of these quarterbacks that are playing that could potentially take over as a starter down the stretch. Trying to stream someone from the Seattle backfield is, they've been hit hard due to injury. Now it looks like Collins, is going to be out for a little bit, but
The
stay
stress
away
of
from the
week
pass
7.
backfield. Yeah, man.
The stress of week 7. So it does appear that Ramondre Stevenson is a coach's decision. So he's just benched. He's a healthy scratch today, which is bananas to me, considering the fact that seemed like he was carving out a niche in that backfield. Okay,
Yep.
moving along with a couple more breaking news, actives, inactives. It appears Sterling Shepard is inactive today. Sterling Shepard will not be in the lineup for the New York Giants, which again, we've discussed it off the top. I think that means better things for Devontae Booker. That definitely means better things for Darius Slayton. So if you have Darius Slayton, you fire him up. Evan Ingram is also active today. So just the list of injuries for the New York Giants is like preposterous. Saquon, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard, all playmakers, all out today. Uh, Moving along, AJ Brown and Julio Jones, both active today, which I think is a bit of a surprise. Julio Jones injured, I believe it was the hamstring again, and that's sort of been
Yep.
lingering and bothering him uh, the entire season. But that's encouraging news for the Tennessee Titans, who certainly will need everything they can get in terms of a shootout against the Kansas City Chiefs. So they need the offense to step up here. Uh, I know that Julio has been a little bit banged up, but just based on name recognition, when Julio Jones is healthy, he's got to be in the lineup, no?
Yeah, we saw it with a highlight reel catch to add to his highlight reel career of
Yeah.
catches, getting the reflection off of the bounce off the helmet, getting the feet in bounds. Julio Jones is questionable every week. He was born, and the doctor's like, yeah, he's questionable. So when I see the queue, I don't even really take too much into consideration because of it, because it seems like he's always questionable. Here's why. If you're uncertain, I mean, he's struggling to get through games. The hamstring has been a thing entire year. Hasn't been the cleanest of fits in Tennessee. How does it work? You know who he's got this week? The Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm,
And their terrible secondary.
mm.
They're terrible defense, quite frankly. So in a game that is going to be a shootout, in a game where it's basically first team to get a stop wins, I expect Kansas City to stack the box with 8 or 9. And remember, when they came back from 17-7 down in the first half in the playoffs a couple of years ago against the Tennessee Titans, they did it by stacking the box and holding Derrick Henry to 70-ish yards. That formula might be fine, but then Ryan Tannehill is going to unleash that play action pass game,
Yeah.
and Julio Jones, a big target over the middle. You're starting him against Kansas City, no question.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I want to get to a question from Youngest on YouTube, just as it relates to this Giants situation. Darius Slayton or AJ Dillon at flex. Now we know Sterling Shepard's not going to be in the lineup. So are you going hard with Darius Slayton here, or are you veering towards AJ Dillon, who certainly they're making a concerted effort to get him the ball in the Green Bay Packers backfield, sort of at the detriment to Aaron Jones? I mean, everybody's sort of east in that Packers offense, but Darius Slayton or AJ Dillon for you, Deej?
I think it's Slayton as well. And again, not a better player, but a better situation, specifically with what's going on around him and what the negative game script will be. Team that's going to have to pass early to stay in the game, and going to have to pass late to probably come back and get back in the game. So I like Slayton.
Yeah, okay. Another breaking news. Antonio Gibson for the Washington football team will be active. He is dealing with a
Ooh,
shin injury, and a lot of people were sort of bullish on JD McKissick and what that meant for him.
yeah.
It had Antonio Gibson decided not to play, but the latest is Antonio Gibson will be in the lineup against the Green Bay Packers. Now, he has been battling with this shin issue for quite some time, and it feels like some weeks it affects him more and other weeks it doesn't. It's kind of unfortunate for fantasy owners because look, the guy with the talent level of Antonio Gibson, he's got to be in the lineup. Like he can be an RB1 any week, but you are running into a potential here where he gets banged up, takes a couple snaps off, takes a couple possessions off, and suddenly the floor becomes a lot lower than something that you otherwise would expect from Antonio Gibson, right?
No question. And when you think about an offensive football player, the shin is one of the few areas where you don't have padding, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of if that shin will be hit, it's when. And so certainly you could put on a soccer style shin pad to protect it. But now you're just a little bit more cumbersome. Your equilibrium is a little bit off unless you're putting them on both legs. So it's not an injury that you see often, but it's one that is extremely painful because it's inevitable. Especially as a running back, someone who needs their legs to plant and cut, but someone who also it has 250-pound men diving at your legs for 2.5 hours. It's something
Yeah.
that certainly will be a factor. And we've seen him start games and leave and go into, the blue tent for some treatment, go back into the locker room. And so even when you're playing him, it's not a set and forget it. You know that you're going to see him get 15, 20, 25 carries, be on the field the entire time. So, you're certainly downgrading McKissick. If you've got Gibson, um, it's great news that he's up and you want to play him, but the evaluation on him isn't as high as it would have been, to start the year.
Yeah, a lot of inconsistency there when it comes to Antonio Gibson. Okay, John on Facebook is asking, it's a half PPR league. Damian Williams or James Conner? Now, Williams will be active today dealing with COVID. He missed last week. I don't think he's been able to practice basically at all. He was finally given clearance to play yesterday, which was the earliest day he would have been able to get clearance. So he draws back into the lineup. A huge unknown because not just because of his health, but because Khalil Herbert has been awesome. The sixth round pick for the Chicago Bears, he's been great. He's been running hard. He's been making good cuts, good reads. And to me, I understand and I have seen the talent that Damian Williams has. But if I'm the Chicago Bears and Khalil Herbert has been performing the way he has, continue to feed him until it doesn't work anymore. So that sort of downgrades Damian Williams to me. And then you have James Conner on the other hand, which is his own situation in Arizona. So are you going Damian Williams or James Conner here?
James Conner. So for those wondering why it's taken so long for Damian Williams to be cleared, he's unvaccinated, which means
Correct.
it's 10 days. So he not only was he only cleared yesterday, he hasn't been able to be in the facility and practice and be, attentive in meetings, although obviously you can do that virtually, but it's not the same. So we're not really sure, especially because, as you mentioned, Herbert has been really, really good, and they're looking for reasons to get him the ball and develop him,
Mm-hmm.
how much he's going to be a factor in that offense. Now, I know you're saying, well, Connor is behind Edmonds. Yes, on the depth chart and to start drives, you're entirely correct. But when they get in the red zone, their goal to go back is James Conner. And so he doesn't need to have a lot of carries to have a lot of impact in fantasy. So I think Connor is the guy. And again, we are expecting them to stomp the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a lot of fourth quarter running the football where, let's be honest, Chicago is going to have to make some plays through the air to keep up and keep pace offensively. So game script as well as the preparation of the week leads me to Connor.
100% in agreement. I believe it's fully James Conner here. Now, the question does appear or should appear to be closer than I think it is in reality this week. Because next week, who knows? Damian Williams could practice all week and it could be a better situation for him. But right now, James Conner has out-touched Chase Edmonds in the last two games. He gets most of his yards and his touchdowns when they're leading the game and they're playing the Houston Texans. They will be leading the entire way. It'll be the James Conner show for the majority of this game. They should be in the red zone, like you said, a large portion of this game. I would be very surprised if James Conner doesn't walk away today without at least a touchdown in this game. So I'm going James Conner there. I know that like his floor, people were a little bit nervous coming into the season, but it appears just based on how prolific the Cards offense is, he's going to get in the end zone. And that means he's going to be getting you fantasy points. Okay, Chris on YouTube, half PPR flex, AJ Green or Miles Sanders. And I mean, Deej, Miles Sanders, they don't give him the ball. They don't give him the ball. He's an amazing talent, and they just refuse to give Miles Sanders the ball. I don't know how much of the blame deserves to fall at the feet of Jalen Hurts, who is feasting in terms of fantasy. There's no question about that. But it seems like they're getting down in games and they're completely abandoning the run. Now, the Eagles coaching staff has said this week that they need to do a better job of getting Miles Sanders the ball. That could just be coach speak, and he could be lined up for yet another 5-touch game for a player and a playmaker in Miles Sanders, and it makes no sense to me. So despite that, you might still have to go Miles Sanders, but who are you going with here, AJ Green or Miles Sanders?
Everything you say is correct. And I would actually say they're getting down in games because they're not establishing the
Yeah,
run. I'd flip that around even though they'd say once they get down to games, they need to continue to run the ball. Well, no, if you run the ball, there's a greater chance that you're not going to get down in games. His usage is perplexing to say the least, but at this point, he's still a better play than AJ Green. You just don't know from week to week that AJ Green is going to be that impactful, that um, and that much of a factor in terms of getting targets. Again, that offense is prolific, but it's somewhat different than an offense like the Dallas Cowboys, where you know exactly where the
mm-hmm.
touches are going to go, and you can feel pretty good about it. I would say something similar around the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think I feel like we've said the same thing about the Cardinals offense, 8 times so far, but there are a lot of mouths to feed. I would say um, there's a lot less mouths to feed in Philly.
It's
The
just
problem is
so
they don't
frustrating.
feed the biggest mouth, and that's
Yeah,
him. But I
I
would
mean,
still say you put him in the flex spot.
I agree. I agree, and it's because the question is AJ Green or Miles Sanders. So you
Yes.
got to go with Miles Sanders in this spot. But I feel you, Chris. Like I understand why you would ask that question because they just don't give the ball to Miles Sanders. It makes no sense to me. DJ's point, it makes that makes a lot of sense. They are not establishing the run. They are getting down in football games, and then it just becomes this sort of snowball effect where what are you going to do when you're down 14 points? You can't just start handing the ball off twice in 3 downs. That's not the way football works. You got to start opening it up, right? So get ahead, Philly, maybe for a change, and give the ball to Miles Sanders because it should work for you. He's a pretty good football player in his own right.
But I would say this is exactly the scenario that the flex spot is for and how it should be utilized. Listen, I have a talented player that should be producing points. They aren't. I can't trust you in one of my two RB spots.
Yeah.
I need to know I'm going to get 15, 20, 25 points from my RBs in those spots. However, I do not want to go to bed at night knowing that you went off for 35 and you're on my bench. So I'm going to throw you in my flex. Hopefully, if you have a great day, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. So I do think actually this is how the flex spot should be utilized. A player with great upside, but you're not exactly sure that you're going to get it from them week in and week out.
I think it's a very, very good point. Well made. Zach on YouTube is asking Mac Jones or Taylor Heineke as my buy fill in. Matt Ryan also available on waiver wire. That one is interesting to me. They each bring their own sort of distinct fantasy and real life skill set. So you going with Mac Jones, Taylor Heineke, or does he go and get Matt Ryan on the waiver wire?
Don't waste a waiver wire selection on Matt Ryan. The options that you have are as good, if not better. I would go with Mac Jones. He's shown me a lot. Starting to slowly but surely take the training wheels off him
Mm-hmm.
in that New England offense. We know Bill Belichick loves to put it on the New York Jets whenever he gets the opportunity, and I think this will be a bit of a statement game. And remember, Mac Jones, people didn't believe it, but he was rumored to be drafted as high as to the New York Jets, and obviously that didn't happen. But going up against another rookie quarterback, I think Mac Jones will have a nice day. So I got Mac Jones.
I like it. I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to say Taylor Heineke, just because I think they're going to get down to the Green Bay Packers. I'm unsure about what I can expect from Antonio Gibson, and the relationship between and the chemistry between Taylor Heineke and Terry McLaurin seems to be working. I am with you though. I don't think it's worth a waiver wire pickup for Matt Ryan. Although if the three of them were on the team at the same time, I think this week Matt Ryan probably would be my choice. But the fact of the matter is he's on the waiver wire. So I would go with Taylor Heineke. But look, those are basically three quarterbacks that are all sort of in the middle tier there. and you take your pick and hope for the best in that spot. Uh, David is asking, is there a Survivor upset potential this week, or are
Ooh.
all huge favorites scheduled to win? Now, I'm in a couple Survivor pools. If you're not, you should be in one. Super fun. But I am going with the Cardinals across the board here because I don't think the Texans have any chance against the prolific Arizona Cardinals. Cliff Kingsbury is back. He missed last week with COVID issues. And I think there's very few times where there's such an obvious team that you need to take. Sometimes you want to go contrarian, sometimes you want to fade. But in this spot, don't overthink it. Go with the Arizona Cardinals in Survivor. You with me?
I like the Cardinals. I also like the Patriots, to be honest.
Interesting.
Um, so they're a pick I would make as well. Is there a Survivor? The question was, is there a surprise Survivor pick?
Yeah. Are you expecting a Survivor upset this week, or should all the huge favorites win?
Whew. Is there
Like
a
we're looking at
Survivor?
Rams, Cardinals. Those I think the Rams are going to be a popular Survivor pick as well. But I
Yeah, I
mean, the
mean,
Cardinals aren't going
well,
to lose. They're not going to
the
lose.
Cardinals aren't going to lose. I don't think the Rams are going to lose. I'm afraid of the revenge game aspect. Just Jared Goff just want to stick it to his old franchise. Even if he does, I
Can
don't think
he
it
though?
matters.
Yeah, he can't.
That's the question,
He
right?
could want to. It
Oh,
doesn't mean he can.
the 0-6 Lions versus the 5-1 Rams. I also think Matthew Stafford just wants to stroll in to
Totally.
the reunion with his new spouse. So I nothing that sticks out to me. I could I mean Monday nighters are kind of weird. Maybe the Seahawks make a frisky play if Metcalf and Lockett have big days, but no, not really. I'm trying to think.
Cards and Rams it
The
is.
the Buccaneers struggled with the Bears in the regular season last year. Could that defense make things difficult for Tom Brady? The Bucs got a lot of offensive talent not in the lineup. No
Their
Gronk, no
secondaries into
AB.
tons of injuries. I'd be afraid of that one. Although Justin
So
Fields, I
maybe
mean,
that.
who knows?
Yeah. So, but nothing that sticks out to me.
Love it. Okay. Joe on YouTube is asking, just had a question in regards to which two to start. Full PPR league. Devontae Booker, Elijah Mitchell, or Mike Davis. Says he lost his two starting running backs. This is it. I feel you. I got Mike Davis going in one of my fantasy leagues too. A difficult spot to be in, but should be safe there with the floor. I'm going Deej Devontae Booker without question. And here it's to me between Elijah Mitchell and Mike Davis. The weather, I get that it usually works in the favor of running backs, but still kind of sketching me out a little bit because that screams like an under situation and not a lot of points scored in the Niners Colts game tonight. So I'm going to go Devontae Booker, Mike Davis here.
As am I. I actually have both players on different teams uh, as well. I think we agree on Booker. We've talked about him a bunch today, and I just think that Dolphins defense has not been good.
No,
We saw the Jaguars have
disappointing.
great success against them, specifically on the ground. Robinson had a big day, and his year has been up and down. So Mike Davis, who again we know is going to get a lot of carries, he has had, maybe a disappointing year considering a lot of people had momentum for him coming into the year because he was going to get so much of the snaps in that offense. I would take Davis. He's going to be on the field more than Mitchell will be, and again, I don't really trust the Niners backfield.
Josh on YouTube is asking one flex, and he's throwing out a lot of names. Is Josh Hunter Renfro, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Dillon, Marquez Callaway, or JD McKissick half PPR? One more time for us. Hunter Renfro, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Dillon, Marquez Callaway, or JD McKissick. That to me is between Hunter Renfro and AJ Dillon. I think I'm still going to go AJ Dillon because the Packers are making an effort to give him the football, give him at least 10 touches. He's an absolute beast. Give it to AJ Dillon, in my opinion. You?
I for me, it's Hunter, and I think a lot of it has to do with that Eagles defense and that Eagles secondary that hasn't
Hmm.
been good. I've talked in the past about how this Raiders offense is built to almost mimic what the Chiefs offense has done. Not as good, but a poor man version. Well, we saw the Chiefs offense dissect the Eagles defense a couple weeks ago, and I think the Raiders will have similar success. So I like Hunter in this spot.
Okay, so as we get close to the end here, a lot of times, like as we close into the show, there's questions that remain unanswered. So I figure it's two of us. Why don't we go a little rapid fire action? We'll give quick answers so that we can try and appease the viewers. We did ask for your questions, so you do
Yes.
deserve to get an answer. And again, obviously, if you have a question, you missed it, we're off by 12 o'clock. Feel free to reach out to Donovan or I, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Okay, so I believe I asked that question. Mike Davis, Michael Pittman, Allen Robinson, or Darnell Mooney, half PPR. Davis, Pittman, Allen Robinson, or Mooney. I'm going Michael Pittman. Although the weather situation scares me a little bit now that I think about it. Why don't you answer first and then let me reevaluate?
I agree. Pittman had a down week last week. Don't be scared. In the last 4 weeks, Carson Wentz is fourth in the league in QBR. He's playing better. His favorite target in that offense is Pittman.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you. I was waffling a
So
little bit there just because of the weather, but I think Michael Pittman is like him and Carson Wentz. It's the real deal. They're gonna try and get him the ball, irrespective of the wind and the rain and whatever might be coming. And I wouldn't fire up any of the other options there with any supreme confidence. So I like Michael Pittman. Koala on YouTube says, "Hey guys, you said Seals Jones earlier. What about Mo Alley Cox or Seals Jones? I'm going Seals Jones." Uh, don't even really have to think that hard about it. And again, weather, Deej, weather.
yeah, I like Ali Cox as well as a streaming tight end options, but Seals Jones is a tier above right now.
Yeah. Albert on Facebook, waffling on my tight end for DraftKings, Hawkinson, 5,100 or Gasicki, 4,700.
Ooh, I think they're pretty similar in this spot. So take the
Save your
extra
money.
money and spend it elsewhere. I go
Yeah.
Gasicki.
I go Gasicki too. I like having the extra $400 to play with. Maybe that gets you another elite player in your DraftKings lineup. Mike on Facebook, Christian Kirk or Jacoby Myers at flex. It's a full PPR league. Christian Kirk or Jacoby Myers. If Jacoby Myers could even like get into the end zone one time in his career, he would be a phenomenal fantasy option. I'm still going with Jacoby Myers here over Christian Kirk just because of, I don't even need to say it. We've said it enough times about the Arizona Cardinals offense.
Yeah, and because in PPR, he's going to get more catches. It's a question of whether or not any of those get in the end zone. But I like Myers for sure.
Andrew on YouTube he just writes Josh Gordon question mark. The answer is no. Don't start Josh Gordon. You don't have to. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Alex, with Sterling Shepard out, would you start Darius Slayton or Amon-Ra St. Brown? I'm going Darius Slayton. No brainer. I get that
Agreed.
Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of carving out that top receiver role in Detroit. Doesn't matter. Today, it's Darius Slayton all day.
Agreed.
Patrick on Facebook, TJ Hawkinson or Ricky Seals Jones at tight end? Whew.
Seals Jones. I think it's
Yeah,
Seals Jones. Listen,
yeah.
the Rams defense is no joke. I don't expect much success on offense. I would downgrade Swift, even though I would still start him as the running back. But I think Seals Jones has a much better day today.
Yeah, all right. Look, I love that little rapid fire section there.
Well
A
done.
lot of really good questions. Um, Again, if we didn't answer it, I didn't see it, whatever, feel free to reach out to us and we will help you up until 1. And then if you have questions about the late window or the Sunday nighter, which I've talked about, and the weather's going to be crazy, should be a fun viewing event nonetheless. Uh, that is it for me and Donovan on Buy Mageddon, Week 7 in the NFL. We wish you the best of luck filling out your rosters. If you got to make a trade to fill out that roster and get players actually playing, I feel for you, but it should be another fun Week 7. Enjoy the football. Deej, Great to chat with you as always. Andy's back next week. But for Donovan and Jesse, thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.